As many of you know, I'm in the process of being shunned by my family right now for religious reasons. I stopped believing the way they did, and as punishment, they decided to stop talking to me. So clearly, I stand against shunning. But is there an acceptable reason to shun somebody? I've heard lots of people encouraging others to shun or shame people as social punishment lately. Let's talk about it. I'm sure lots of you guys have heard my story, but let me recap for those who might not know. I grew up Jehovah's Witness, from birth until I was 18. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses shun people who stop believing the way they do. In fact, that isn't really a unique situation. Lots of cults shun friends and family who leave the faith. When I was Jehovah's Witness, I didn't call what they did shunning. When I heard the term shunning, I thought Amish. And I honestly didn't think it was all that harmful. But eventually, as time went on, and as my own family started to shun me, I realized how harmful it really is. I've talked about my mother's behavior before. On my 18th birthday, I left my house and had to live on my own. I was in 11th grade in high school, kicked out on the street. I crawled in the window of a girl I knew from school and lived in her bedroom for 3 weeks until I could find a roommate who was willing to take me in. I dropped out of school because I couldn't support myself and go to school at the same time. And all of this happened because of Jehovah's Witnesses' feelings on outsiders, or their feelings on people who decide to leave the religion. Now, I still believed it at the time, actually. It took me years to break out of the mental conditioning that took place when I was on the inside. But the fact that I had a girlfriend and was trying to live a normal life, that's the thing that got me kicked out. I was dating an outsider. I went to a party and drank alcohol. I also smoked a cigarette. I'd been isolated from society for 4 years of my life in my teen years, for religious reasons. And I was so completely socially crippled. I was trying to find my place in society and have a good time. They kicked me out of the religion for it, and my mom kicked me out of the house for it too. Needless to say, I have lots of problems with shunning. I think it's wrong. I believe that the best way to convince somebody that they're doing something that's wrong is to talk it through with them, befriend them, keep them close to you, work with them. I was damn near my lowest point at that time. The best thing to do was not to kick me out. It was to get closer to me and work with me. That's when I was 18. I'm 29 now. 11 years later, my mom still doesn't talk to me. I used to go to the Kingdom Hall once a year with my ex. As an outsider, she was allowed to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses at the Kingdom Hall. But as a disfellowshipped person, they weren't allowed to talk to me. It was fascinating to see the contrast between love bombing and shunning. They want to shower a newcomer with love, try to bring them into the religion, try to give positive feedback so they'll want to come back to the Kingdom Hall again. So my ex and I are standing next to each other, and the people I've known since I was 8 years old won't even look at me. But they're showering my ex, who they were just meeting for the first time, in praise and happiness and adoration. It was like I was a ghost, not even present. So is it ever okay to shun? When is it okay, if ever? Let me give you a few scenarios when people typically shun others and give you my take on it. So Jehovah's Witnesses encourage kids to get baptized as early as possible. I've heard of kids getting baptized at 7, 8, 9 years old. Personally, I think I was 14. How does a Jehovah's Witness act when their child, say 14 years old, still lives in the house with them, decides to get an outsider as a girlfriend? That's against the rules. What happens when they get disfellowshipped? Do they shun the kid? Do they kick them out of the house? The Watchtower Society, aka Jehovah's Witnesses, tell their members that they can't legally kick their 14-year-old kid out on the street, but they don't have to invite them to the dinner table. They don't have to invite them to sit in the living room with them. They don't have to talk to them about certain subjects. So what you'll find a lot of the time is Jehovah's Witness parents of underage disfellowshipped kids won't kick them out of the house, though some of them do. They'll just treat them like trash until the kid leaves. They won't look at them, they won't talk to them, they won't invite them to dinner. 14 years old. What are you supposed to do? A lot of the time, the kids will leave the house. Imagine trying to live on your own at 14. Usually they'll find a friend from school and live with them or something. That is, if they have friends from school. In that case, is it okay for the kid to shun the parents? In my opinion, the parents are mistreating the kid and making their lives miserable. As far as I'm concerned, the parents brought it on themselves by making them miserable. I would say the kid shunning the parents is acceptable. Here's another scenario. You're 28 years old, and you finally come out to your parents as being atheist, or just plain not believing the same things as them. Maybe you're trying to switch religions or something. Your parents get all up in arms and continue to send messages to you about how you're gonna burn in hell if you don't change your ways. This scenario is reminiscent of Matt Dillahunty and of Seth Andrews. Both of their parents did this stuff. Matt's parents sent him a birthday card that said, "We're praying for God to stop you at any cost." Seth's parents continued to berate him over and over until he couldn't take it anymore. They didn't respect boundaries. They didn't show the basic respect and decency that any human is afforded by any other human. Is it okay to shun people then? Same as the last case, in my opinion, the person isn't showing basic human respect for you by respecting your boundaries, and they're the one that burned the bridge. It's acceptable to shun in that case too. Dan Savage, a famous gay podcaster, says when you come out as gay, you should expect stupid, offensive questions. You should expect people to not get it at first. Give them a year. If they still don't get it after that time, that's when you start shunning for your own emotional well-being. Now, don't get me wrong, if somebody leaves religion and turns into a toxic mess, starts berating you for being stupid because you still believe in Christianity, or telling you only idiots believe in the Bible, you're perfectly justified in ending that relationship. You aren't obligated to maintain a relationship with somebody that's emotionally damaging. But what about a case in which it isn't acceptable to shun somebody? I've heard this meme going around a lot lately. The reason you shouldn't be friends with people who believe differently from you is because it's important to make them pay a social penalty for believing in an ideology in which you disagree. By continuing to be friends with them, you don't make them pay this penalty, and thus they believe their actions are acceptable. Peer pressure works. Now, what's wrong with that? Is it wrong to end friendships because somebody believes something different than you? Should atheists stop befriending Christians? Should liberals stop befriending conservatives? Like I said through the entirety of this video, there are acceptable times to shun people. If somebody is mistreating you, if somebody's making you miserable, then by all means, shun away. They ended the relationship when they started mistreating you. But I refuse to accept that liberals shouldn't be friends with conservatives. In fact, my brother's conservative. I'm not conservative. Am I not allowed to be close to him because of his political views? Trying to force people to conform to your way of thinking through social pressure is wrong. That's exactly what Jehovah's Witnesses do. That's exactly what the Amish do. That's what Scientologists do. That shouldn't be what we do. We can't call that out as wrong when others do it and then find our own reasons to do it. How will we ever move people over to new positions and ideas if we disconnect from people who think differently than us? This is creating an in-group and out-group mentality. If you aren't with me, then you're against me. That's black and white, us versus them thinking. It's extremist. I've mentioned this before, and I really don't touch on the subject very often, but every now and then I feel like it's important. I used to be what's known as an anti-SJW. I'm sure a lot of you guys know what the social justice movement is. For those who don't, social justice is an acknowledgement of the fact that there's discrimination and bias in society. That's what social justice is. There are progressive solutions, there are liberal solutions, there are conservative solutions, but there's a group of people who call themselves social justice warriors, or SJWs. Colloquially, the term is kind of a pejorative. Most people don't want to be called an SJW. Even though social justice isn't inherently bad, it's considered a pejorative because lots of people in the social justice movement are extremists. They believe in, for example, shunning people based on their beliefs. It's an in-group, out-group mentality. Black and white, us versus them thinking. And in fact, it's actually the definition of bigotry. Intolerance toward those who hold different opinions from oneself. I thought bigotry was an umbrella term that covered racism, sexism, or whatever else, but actually, it's basically discrimination against people based on their beliefs as opposed to their skin color or gender or whatever else. I don't believe in bigotry. Like I said, if those beliefs manifest into extremism and they start to mistreat you, that's another story. Shun away. But you can't place yourself in opposition to people based solely on their beliefs on subjects. It's one step down the wrong road. So what's an anti-SJW? I mentioned I was one at one point. An anti-SJW is a person who places themselves in opposition to SJWs. I consider myself a social justice advocate. I believe in trying to find ways to reduce racial and gender-based bias in society. But when I say SJW, I'm not talking about social justice advocacy. I'm talking about the extremists. As far as I'm concerned, anti-SJW is the other side of the same coin. It's an extremist position, just like SJW is. I've seen lots lots of extremist behavior from both of them, and that's why I don't consider myself from either camp anymore. I'll just carry the label social justice advocate and leave it at that. But I feel like it's important to point out extremism when I see it. I stand for a good portion of things that SJWs stand for. Not everything, but most things. However, the behavior of the extremists is wrong. You shouldn't separate yourself into in-groups and out-groups, and you shouldn't do everything you can to silence people. That's not productive. I feel like there's a lot of hate going around from both sides of the battle, and I would love it if we could all come together and work with each other to hash out problems instead of attacking and trying to destroy each other. Anyways, that's all I had to say on the subject. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, then you can support me in one of two ways. First, you can go to my Teespring and check out my merchandise. I'm trying to make a shirt and a coffee mug for every religion I've covered, but I've covered a lot, so it's kind of a slow process. The other way is through Patreon. I never know if YouTube's gonna demonetize my videos. They've been doing that a lot lately, so if you want to guarantee I can continue doing what I'm doing and still pay rent, then consider following me on Patreon. You also get to see my videos early if you follow me there. And I release them on Facebook too, so follow me there too. And finally, you can check out my podcast if you want to hear me talk about all kinds of subjects. I did a detailed breakdown of a debate between an SJW and an anti-SJW recently on there, so go take a look. I also talk about games and politics and all kinds of other stuff. All links are in the description as always. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.